This subject came up, I guess, at our watershed, how to design a water quality monitoring program workshop that Kevin and TWRI put together a few months ago. He called me up and wanted to know if I would participate in a discussion on defining success and talking about success in the program, particularly in the state program, because there seemed to be a little bit maybe of misunderstanding, miscommunication about our creative use of the term success stories. It means something a little bit different for EPA and particularly the non-point source program than it might mean to different people in other parts of the program. So he sent me a draft agenda for this meeting, and the title, lo and behold, was Defining Success. It's like, no pressure there. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I am going to do a little bit about different perspectives. I'm going to present this kind of from, I'm a Fed, right? So this is going to come from a top-down approach, but not really. We're going to start at the top because that's kind of where everything originates. Every agency presentation has to have a Clean Water Act slide. I know you probably all have this memorized. It's to restore, maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. And it covers point and non-point source programs. There are a lot of programs that are authorized and funded through the Clean Water Act. So this really is significant. It's a little redundant because you see it so often, but it really is significant, and this is where everything comes from. The word restore and the word maintain are particularly important to our program, and that really drives the parameters that define success for our program. If you've ever, I know everybody in here has friends and family and loved ones who aren't in this business. How do you tell them what you do? Okay, it's kind of a common problem. We are defined by what we're not. We take care of anything that doesn't come from the end of a pipe. Everybody's got to find their own way of explaining that to people, but I think that's a problem that we all have. Basically, I think the best definition or explanation is rain falls on the landscape, pollutants run off, and that's what we take care of. So, the Clean Water Act directly authorizes EPA to administer the non-point source program. Within that, there are a couple of things that define our success. And this is kind of like having a professor or a teacher that gives you a major test and it only has 2 questions on it. Okay, this is our challenge. Our success is documented, our parameters for success are documented in the National Program Guidance. And I've given you on your handout, there's the website here. You can go look at all the program activity measures for all the water programs. The non-point source program has 2. We have WQ9, which has to do with pollutant load reduction. And actually this is that should be load reductions and not loads. We're not in the business of adding loads back to the watershed. We're in the business of reducing those loads. There are national targets. It's WQ09A, B, and C, and they're divided up to address nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. You notice there's a pretty significant parameter for Texas that's missing from that, would be bacteria. So we're really not graded on that. The other one is WQ10, success stories. If you Google success story, EPA success stories, you'll go to a website and you'll see a big, complicated explanation of how you define success stories. And there are different ways you can do it and get your story up on EPA's website. But to get credit under WQ10, it has to be a delisting. Okay, if we go back to the Clean Water Act slide that we saw earlier, is restore and maintain. These 2 parameters directly address restoration. There's not anything that directly addresses healthy watersheds or maintenance. And there have been pushback and negotiations between the regions and headquarters on give us some more parameters that we can help to define our program, because there are a lot of things that we do to maintain healthy watersheds and healthy water bodies that is just not reflected in the way that the program is evaluated on a national basis. Within the national program are state programs. So our guidelines and Clean Water Act authorizes the states to conduct their non-point source program. It also authorizes funding for components of those programs. And EPA assesses the success of the state program primarily, and there are a lot of documents, a lot of information that goes into it. Basically, you have a 100-word question or 100-question test for your evaluation, and a lot of them are essays. So it's not quite as black and white as just having two parameters. And our main tool for doing this is defined in Section 319H8 of the Clean Water Act, and has to do with satisfactory progress. For EPA to continue to provide grants to the state, you have to define, the state has to demonstrate that they're making adequate progress on implementing their program. Now, how you define that program is really up to the state. EPA would like you to work within the framework that we provide you, but the details of how that's worked out and how that's measured are basically up to the state. As part of this checklist, there are 6 major questions, and we're just going to kind of breeze through these pretty quickly because you can go to the guidelines and basically Google it. I hate to say that, but our website is so messy. It's hard to find anything on there. But you can find some components of satisfactory progress and how all the different things that go into that. Right now, our guidelines are being changed and updated. So the examples that I'm providing here are just kind of an overview. Some of those may change with the FY13 guidelines. Some of them stay the same. So we're just going to kind of give you some examples. The first thing we look at is the state meeting its statutory and regulatory requirements. This includes whether there's an updated state management program, and if you are not familiar with the state management program, which I'm pretty sure everybody in here is, go to the TCEQ or School Board website. There's a link to it. The annual report that the state provides. I know y'all have seen the really beautiful, glossy, fact-filled report that the state provides every year. That's a requirement. Whether there's documented water quality improvements, are you meeting or contributing to the WQ9 and the WQ10 targets for the region or the nation? Are you reporting grits? And this question basically has to do with whether you're entering the mandated elements of grits. Grits is the grant reporting and tracking system, and the nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment loadings are some examples of mandated elements that the state's required to put into grits. Third is whether they're implementing priority watershed-based plans. These would be the 9-element watershed-based plans or water protection plans that they're called in Texas, and whether the state's actually working in its priority, the watersheds that it's determined are priority. Fiscal accountability. There's a lot of questions about that. Are they doing the RFP correctly, obligating funds on time, are the expenditures being drawn down the way that they should be? Texas is one of 2 states in our region that has a PPG, Performance Partnership Grant. This is based on an agreement, and it has to do with the way grant funds come into the state or divided up within the state and used to support various programs. We want to make sure that what we're doing within the non-point source program is consistent with the priorities at the time. And this is basically any other issues. So those are the main things that EPA looks at in documenting the success. Now, if you drill down further, talked a little bit about the state management program. So go to the TCEQ Soil Board website, and you'll find where this program is. This outlines the BMPs that are going to be used throughout the state, the programs that help implement those BMPs, the schedule for when that's going to happen, and funding sources that help it, because 319 is not the only funding source that the state non-point source program depends on. There are a lot of other programs, a lot of other funding sources that help contribute to the overall performance of the program. What we're going to talk about today are the goals and milestones. And these are specifically laid out in the management plan with dates. How many are we going to do of these goals? How many? When are we going to do them? Who's going to be involved? Things like that. This is how we're going to start looking at success. There are four goals: one long-term goal and two short-term goals. Basically, the long-term goal is to protect and restore water quality, and the assessment, implementation, and education are the short-term goals that go with that. We're going to do a little exercise. Y'all all have a piece of paper out in front of you. We're going to go through these milestones, and I'm going to ask you whether you contribute to this milestone, whether you engage in any activities that support it, whether you directly do it. I want you to put a little hash mark on that piece of paper. And at the end, we're going to add all those little hash marks up. And we're going to get a little bit of a sense of how all these small activities funnel up into success based on these milestones. So the management program has to be updated once every 5 years. So I know a lot of you, and I want you agency people, especially the state people, to contribute to this too, because I know a lot of y'all had a lot of work contributed to this. Whether you contributed to the update of the management plan in the previous year, I know a lot of you did, put a little hash mark. It won't be due again until 2017, so this is basically our operating guide for the next 5 years. Anybody who's contributed to the annual report, there were a lot of stories, articles that get written up and put in those. I know there were people, project managers that had to do with publishing that thing and writing up things for that, formatting it, whatever you did. Put a hash mark. 319H grant solicitation, that would be the RFP or the RFGA. If you contributed to writing that up, that's kind of more of an administrative deal for the state, but if you did, put a hash mark down. And we've got 2 of these for each year because there's one for each agency, one for TCQ and one for SOLWAR. 319 grant application. If anybody in here had a work plan that was included in the FY12 grant, put a hash mark down. And that's if you worked on it. You don't have to be project manager. If you worked on it, whatever, contributed to it, sent it to the printer, whatever. The grant reporting, grant reporting. That's going to be GRITS reporting. And there's 4 there because it needs to be updated twice a year, and 2 agencies are responsible for doing that. So if you have anything to do with grant report or GRITS reporting and grant reporting in FY12, put a hash mark. There are 3 short-term goals: data collection and assessment, implementation, and education. And each one of these short-term goals has a list of milestones to go with it. The assessment report is mandated in the guidelines as a required element in Section 305B it's contained in Section 305B of the Clean Water Act. And this is basically your 303B list and your 305B integrated report. That's done every 2 years. It was done in 2012. You did it done again in 2014 and then again in 2016. If you contributed to that, but that group is not generally here. I don't think we have any TCQ water quality monitoring staff in here. But if you're involved with a project that monitors water quality and that data gets contributed to the 305B report, put a hash mark down. The annual quality management plan update. Now this is a very often painful administrative activity for the state agencies. Each agency, in order to receive a grant, has to have a QMP or quality management plan in place. And that's reviewed, updated yearly as needed. If you had anything to do with the QMP and QMP update, put a hash mark down. Watershed characterization projects. Okay, remember this is under the data collection and assessment goal. So if you're working on any project where you're collecting data to characterize that watershed in any way, put a hash mark. If you're working on a watershed plan development project, if you're collecting data or assessing data for any kind of a watershed plan development project, put a hash mark. If you're collecting data to support assessment activities for an approved TMDL or an I-plan, put a hash mark. The second goal is implementation. So first we have assessed data, collect data, assess data to characterize a watershed. Now we're going to start implementing things, doing work in the watershed to help improve water quality. The Priority Watershed Report Update is an administrative activity that is done every 2 years. This is a new activity by the state. You've heard it referred to as the WAP process, or the Watershed Action Planning process. If you've had anything to do with that update, which we're still in the first cycle here, so not a lot of people have had exposure to that yet, go ahead and put a hash mark. If you've worked on a project that coordinates information, coordinates people, coordinates entities, then put a hash mark down in support of a watershed plan. If you have worked on a project where you've contributed to the reduction of non-point source loads, put a hash mark down. And then put another hash mark down if it includes nitrogen, and one if it includes phosphorus, and one if it includes sediment. You can't put one down yet if it includes bacteria. Can't be too flexible, right? Okay, if you've worked on any project that has implemented a watershed protection plan, put a hash mark. If you've worked on any project that implements a TMDL or an I-plan, put a hash mark down. And if you've done worked on a project that includes monitoring to assess the implementation, go ahead and put a hash mark. Texas Watershed Steward Program. How many people have attended a Watershed Steward Program? All right, put one down. If you've ever not just maybe attended one, maybe you have written a press release for one, maybe you've set up chairs for one, maybe you contacted local people to try to figure out where you're going to have one. You've worked on the little aerial view of Google Earth. You put that together for a Watershed Steward Program. Put a hash mark. If you participated in a stream team volunteer event, how many people have done that? Actually participated. All right, cool. That milestone you see is really high, significantly higher than most of the others that we've seen because they're counting the number of volunteers, not the number of events. So we thought that was a pretty good gauge of success in that arena. If you've attended a watershed planning short course, which I really hope most of y'all have, can I see show of hands? All right, that's good, that's good. If you've put materials together, contributed, maybe you weren't actually there, but you supported it somehow administratively, go ahead and put a hash mark for that one. Watershed Roundtable, okay, that's a gimme, everybody here's. And if you've contributed to the Coastal Urban BMP Guidance Manual, I think it's due out in 2015, but if you've done any work on a project that contributes to that, information-wise, anecdotal, administrative, put a hash mark down. Whew. That's a lot for 15 minutes. What I wanted to do today was to set you up for thinking about all the little ways that you guys individually contribute to success of the program. So when EPA talks about we need to see a WQ10, a delisting of a water body, you don't look at that as some pie in the sky thing going, how could I ever help make that happen? Everything that we talked about today helps make that happen. It contributes to success of the program. There's a lot more things here to consider. And we have just scratched the surface of it. It's built on a lot of actions and activities, not just what we've talked about here. But how many people have driven home late at night after a stakeholder meeting? That's a contribution. That's a major contribution. Not everybody out there in this world is willing to do that. So that really contributes a lot. So that everybody here, I want you to understand, has contributed, will contribute. And when we talk about, we break out into the sessions later, I want you to take these things into consideration too. Don't just think about, well, maybe if we tell EPA what we really do or make them understand our priorities, then they'll change the national program measure and we can have more success. Don't even go there. Think about this from a bottom-up perspective and how what you do can be revised. I mean, we've got a lot of good ideas in here, a lot of smart people. Think about it from your perspective and what you can contribute. That's it. Oh, and those numbers, okay, you're going to add up all your little hashtags, and that's going to be your number. When we break out into the groups later, I would like each group to total up that number. So each group is going to report out their number. Whenever you report out on the results of your questions, I want to see your numbers.
Thank you, Tina.